We're lower than the world.
Lower than the world?
You can't do that. You have
Why
to go,
can't I do that?
You have to go by where, look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases.
51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy compared to...
You don't know that.
I do. It's on
You
the...
don't know that.
You think they're faking their statistics? South Korea?
I
An
won't get
advanced
into
country?
that because I have a very good relationship with the country. But you don't know that. And they have spikes.
Donald Trump. I haven't seen a politician so determined to lose his own position since Tony Abbott almost lost a leadership spell to an empty chair. I've said more than once that 2020 is an unlosable election for Trump, that all he has to do is shut the f*** up. And that absolutely includes blasting off the cuff tweets to a media class already hell-bent on finding the worst in everything he does. CNN has warped from a respected global news network to E! News Trump edition in the space of 5 short years, where anything and everything's a scandal. Now, it's true that journalists generally lean to the left, but given that all organisations are made up of people, it's not surprising that individuals with an investigative global outlook tend to think this way, and nor is it some great conspiracy against the right that needs to be rectified. An exception exists in print media in Australia on account of the piss-poor performance of Fairfax papers in the last decade, going from this country's most respected broadsheets to what's trending on Twitter today newsletters. News Corp now has a massive dominance in this space and even runs the national broadsheet at a loss because of the sheer influence the Australian newspaper has around Parliament House in Canberra. But it doesn't really matter what sort of media environment politicians operate in. The smart ones work within the parameters set by the press, while the less intelligent actors try to regulate their media enemies and define what the truth is in legislation. Now, it's actually hard to tell where the Donald fits on this sliding scale. I mean, he talks like a blunt force object, but the results, for one example, the $2 billion worth of free media coverage he got throughout the 2016 campaign, suggest a method to the madness. Nobody with even the most cursory interest in global politics could be ignorant of the fact that Trump operates with a significant handicap here. The Donald himself certainly knows it, using clever ad hominem attacks and branding his press enemies as enemies of justice and truth itself, which is certainly not great for US democracy, but it is an incredibly effective campaign tactic, particularly so where his opponent has spent months leading up to this election locked in a basement, slowly losing his mind. By the way, I think that's also beyond dispute at this point.
I want to be clear, I'm not going nuts. That saves billions of gallons of gasoline. I mean, billions of, I think it's $2.3 billion worth of, $500 billion in savings and 2-point-something billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air. Well, folks, eliminate one tax loophole out of $1.6 trillion worth, $1.4 trillion worth. Out of $1.4 billion. It was a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
Joe Biden is a really bad choice to run what is still the most powerful nation, politically and economically, on the planet. And not because of his views or policy proposals either. It really just depends on your political persuasion whether or not you think he'd actually be worse than Trump. And again, standing on the outside looking in, it is depressingly close. So given all that's at stake, deteriorating relationships with a belligerent and offensive Chinese Communist Party, an unending COVID-19 crisis that has every reporter and bureaucrat on the planet just expecting the first coronavirus vaccine in human history to fall out of the sky in time for Christmas, and more economic spot fires than I care to count, why hasn't one of his advisors confiscated the idiot's phone? The entire Republican Party governance platform is riding on this election, as well as a few Supreme Court justices, so shrugging their shoulders and claiming Trump just doesn't listen to his advisors is not going to fly. Whether or not that's true, and that probably depends on the issue at hand, Politics is and always has been a team sport, a game of compromise, an endless tug of war for the chance to implement the tiniest sliver of your ideals in a democratic fashion, which probably explains why I wasn't great at it. Leaving the Donald to publicly debate delaying the election is giving the more extreme elements of the Democrats and the media exactly what they want. And we haven't even touched on the unbelievable circumstances where the most technologically advanced nation on earth can't even ID people or count postal ballots properly. It's genuinely difficult to understand how Donald Trump could be so reckless with the coming poll, so dumb as to hand feed the narratives of his enemies. But hey, pride always cometh before the fall. So get the CIA to put his phone on some sort of localized intranet, construct a secret Faraday cage around the White House, commission Google to build an AI that removes his dumbest statements before they enter the national conversation and multiply quicker than a certain virus. Just do something to make Donald Trump stop talking. The 2020 election is too important, and not just for residents of the United States, to be decided by his hyperactive thumbs.